senhoras que nos
Miss and Misters that is following us from the Câmara TV Brasil.
De maio, onde discutir.
She's talking about the other bidding and everything that's discussing.
Eu sou a deputada federal, professora,
segunda
coordenadora adjunta da
deputada Rosa Neide and professor.
Nós compomos o colegiado da Secretaria da Mulher da Câmara dos Deputados.
We formed the Secretary of Humans in Brazilian Federal Government. And we taking for everybody that followed this meeting. Thank you for accepting this calling. We hope Brazil starts to have the most of women than male in the chamber.
Dois turnos para cidades com mais de 200 mil habitantes.
She thinks we're gonna have elections with 2 phases.
E hoje somos maioria em diversas carreiras profissionais.
We are the most people in most of the careers in Brazil. In this very important
trabalho.
And we have we have a problem in work because Brazilian works is very difficult.
Hoje precisamos iluminar os desafios que ainda temos.
Today we need to do these challenges to
importante do nosso país, o importante avanço em termos políticos foi ocupado por uma mulher, Dilma Rousseff.
It's important to say that we have a position in Brazil that we had Dilma Rousseff, the president of Brazil in the past years.
Uma mulher
a woman that most of times working to being a woman and fight for women's sorry.
Das parlamentares.
We are 15% of the people in the Congress in Brazil, women. We are 50%. It's very
e os homens
because Brazilian women have the education to care children, to care family. We don't have the Brazilian woman to work in the politics.
Mexendo na divisão sexual do trabalho, fazendo que mais mulheres jovens ocupem cargos eletivos.
Many countries has most of the places in the politics working by humans.
Campanhas eleitorais das mulheres, abrindo espaço para elegê-las. Por fim, a título de informação, gostaria de destacar também que estamos construindo uma proposta para um observatório na política, através da Secretaria da Mulher.
We want to show you that we are building information about observatory of human in politics in Brazil.
Gostaria de informar a todos que esta reunião está sendo gravada.
Would you like to inform that Congress that meeting is recording and showing TV?
Esta nossa assessoria da Câmara, esse nosso observatório,
This observatory is divided by 3 places: the violence of women,
atuação partidária e processos eleitorais.
3, how women work in the politics in Brazil.
Acerca da atuação política.
It's very fast, please.
Parlamentos, partidos políticos, prefeituras, governos.
In the 3 places in the government, we try to work for women, like the community directors, the governments in city and states and countries.
Neste momento, agradecendo a todas que receberam.
This moment, and I would like to say thank you for everybody that is in the meeting.
Bem comigo dividir.
Now, other deputada for Brazil from the state of Bahia is gonna talk.
Todas as companheiras.
Deputada Litsi Mata e Souza. She's want to say hello, good afternoon, our friends from many countries, our politicians from many countries. That is gonna bring us the experience and everything that happened in your country to fight for humans questions. I would like to thank you, Rosa Weber. She's the coordinator of this seminar, and I'm gonna help her.
Todas as nossas.
And I would like many thanks for everybody that is in this meeting.
Para com o nosso esforço de ter mais mulheres no parlamento.
And we're gonna try to have more women in Brazil, especially in the chamber, that we have only 15% of women.
No Brasil, homens e mulheres passaram a ter igualdade perante a lei.
In Brazil, women and men now have the same lawyers, the same obligations and everything to vote and everything is the same. Now we start the talk about the codes. And 1995, with a law in Brazil, we determined that we're gonna have a minimum of human in many parts of Brazil. Like we have to have a part of woman in all the parts, but most of the parts has problems with that. But we have a law that makes every part in Brazil have a minimum of women of 50%, I don't know, 20% of the parts have to be human. Minimum of 30% has to be human, and the max is like 70%.
Os partidos não reservaram as vagas. Porque
most of the parts doesn't have the vacation for women.
Não fazemos. Que é uma alternativa, uma opção.
What's the alternative for parts that doesn't have the amount of the females? In 2009,
cada partido ou coligação preencherá o mínimo de 30% e o máximo.
Since 2009, we have a minimum of women in the
tempo de propaganda partidária.
And also we have the television campaign, we have to have a time, some minutes for all the humans from the parties. That's important for the election in Brazil because we have to have the time. It's very important to share the ideas from the other humans.
Por que nós não teríamos direito aos 30% correspondentes do fundo de financiamento?
But we don't have the most of the place in the parts, like 30%. We don't have the amount of the financial amount of money from the parties to the woman. And also the television, we don't have enough time. So the money and the time for the television, we don't have the same.
50% no número de deputadas federais eleitas na
In the last election, we have the amount of 50% of deputadas, human deputadas, that shows the participation of the human in the chamber. It's growing up.
A Laís, a tradutora de espanhol, entrou no canal de português.
Sorry, we have a problem with the translation in Spanish that mixed the channel Portuguese and English. So, sorry, just a moment. We grow 50% of women in the chamber. And most of the community assemblies, we grow almost 30%. Sorry, I didn't get the numbers. 35% of human in the communities.
Determinações, saímos de 13,5% para 16% de eleitas, ou seja, 18%.
We grown from 13% to 16% of the human in the election. So that shows that we are growing up in the to make the human and male the same numbers in the chamber.
Uma discussão da necessidade de modificação novamente da legislação.
We have to study and change our legacy about the determination to amount of the female in the politics.
Ocupar percentual das cadeiras do Parlamento com mulheres e outro percentual com os homens. Nós temos.
So we have to have a percent of human and male in the chamber, and we have a lot of projects to change this situation.
Tem como relator
we have a work group
nacional de partido que está tentando fazer o
sorry.
do sistema eleitoral que nós enfrentaríamos, sair da proporcionalidade.
Have one deputy that is doing a study about the participation of the human in the politics in most of the regions
e
of
da reserva de vagas de cadeiras para as mulheres. Há um grande debate significa mudar a Constituição brasileira e alcançar um quórum maior, e nós só temos até outubro para realizar essa tarefa, porque a lei da anuidade eleitoral nos obriga, ou seja...
Sorry, just a second. We're gonna change the translator.
Nunca menos disso. Então, são estes...
We're gonna change the translator, but...
Na discussão que temos hoje, que é a análise dos sistemas eleitorais, das
the
regras...
most important thing that we need to...
do que já é...
sorry, we need to change about the participation of the human in the election process.
E também das regras de salariais, de salários.
And we have to change the salaries of the human that is not the same in Brazil. We have male and the human with different salaries.
E vejamos essa conquista singular do Chile, que conseguiu mais de 50% das cadeiras da Assembleia.
Again about the 50% of the human in the plenary, in the Congress in Brazil, that it changed our view of the human in Brazil. Just saying thank you and to everybody.
Thank you so much, Lidsi, for your participation here, for representing us so well in the chamber. You were part of the construction of the Constitution here in Brazil, and you have a vast experience. And you're always ahead in this fight for the participation of women in the spaces of power. I like to send my best to all the other women who are here present. Carmen Zanotto, Elcione Barbalho,
she's going to say all the names,
Renata Abreu.
She wants to send a hug to everybody.
Renata Abreu, who is the one who proposed the bill to change the number of women inside the chamber. Maria do Rosário, Teresa Nelman, all the deputies here present.
Todas as 77 mulheres.
I'd like to thank all the 77 women
thank you for the 67%
who are here present
of the
now we have
in the chamber.
5% more women here, especially through the finance.
Nossa parceira aqui na Comissão da Mulher, convido para fazer uso da palavra Ana Cláudia Jaquim.
She's invited.
Participação política da ONU Mulheres Brasil, parceira na realização deste evento e parceira em todos os...
Tenho que escutar você falando inglês.
We have now our guest from UN Women, who is an important partner.
We have a
for the
problem with the
Secretary of Women.
just
And
a
now
second,
she'll give her speech.
We're gonna change the translation.
Thank you, Rosa. I'm very glad to be here and be able to help in this moment with the Secretary of Women.
She wants to say hello
Deputy Lidsi.
To all integrates.
And I'd like to say my best to all the deputies who are present here in this debate that is so urgent. Especially now that we have a bill in discussion here. The parliamentary democracy here, it's a reality, and then the participation of women is a right. And it's something important for the elimination of all the there's also an international agreement in which we are part of as Brazil that looks for a way to bring women into sustainable development and make them part of the politics and the politic decision. And for that, we need to work to make our numbers better.
paritárias, homens e
Our goal
mulheres.
is to have a 50-50 participation of women and men.
Uma participação paritária, e a gente sabe que os países onde se logrou alcançar uma participação
We
paritária,
know that the countries that were able to get close to this number of 50-50, it was a work that went beyond parties so that everyone could get this result as a whole.
pessoas que contribuem em outros países, inclusive da América Latina, como teremos as parlamentares aqui
I'd like to
hoje.
thank everyone who contributes to this goal internationally, especially the deputies that are here present from other countries from Latin America.
Existem também arranjos institucionais que são capazes de superar ou de mitigar o efeito dessa discriminação no âmbito da sociedade, ou seja, existem mecanismos eleitorais que podem assegurar uma progressão ou, enfim, a garantia da paridade entre homens e mulheres na vida política. A gente sabe que o Brasil ocupa hoje...
We know that Brazil right now occupies a very low part in the number of countries who have 50-50 for women and men in the power. So Brazil is in a very bad position.
Então, essa segue uma agenda
including when you compare to countries like Haiti and Bahamas.
Como mulheres temos buscado
For
colaborar.
us, from UN Women, it's something that we are always looking for, to have more women inside these different spheres of power. Therefore, the UNPD and UN Women have been working in a way to accelerate the participation of women in the political life, and having as a reference the idea of having 50-50 of men and women in power, not only in Brazil, but also in all of Latin America. So you can have an index of this political participation.
Listados nessa iniciativa, mostrando mais uma vez, né, a possibilidade, não só os desafios, mas também as possibilidades de aprimoramento institucional para se avançar na paridade. E aí, enfim, acho que o Parlamento é o espaço sempre mais...
So the Parliament, it's the most important space to discuss this and deliberate in this matter.
Acredito que a professora Drude também.
But to be here and bring some contributions, I also would like to talk about Ms. Drude, who will also be able to bring a lot of experience from different countries. One of this is the experience of countries with an open list. And what we know for the model of reservation. I'm sorry, Ms. Drude, she's speaking very quickly. We don't have a high number of women elected, just 15% in the parliament. And any reservation to show an advance, it has to at least gradually enhance this percentage.
Favorável em termos globais. Também a gente, como vem sendo discutido e também provocado por mulheres que estão em partidos, candidatas, outros movimentos sociais, tem trazido também muito, com bastante força a questão do descumprimento.
Social movements are also bringing a lot of force to this movement and to this goal, especially the matter of financial investment, which is an important question when it comes to this. So we need to understand better how these mechanisms are implemented here. To briefly finish my speech, we'd also like to recall there are also dynamics inside of the group of women that causes different inequalities. So we have multiple discriminations, especially with Black women, indigenous women, trans women, women with disabilities. And usually these groups have more difficulties to be able to integrate this group of power. So the legislation, the bill that is being debated, also needs to think about these specific groups and these differences between the group of women. So when UN Women has collaborated not only in Brazil, but in other countries with this debate and adding to the efforts of the parliamentaries. We also invite you to get to know a little bit more about our work and the studies that we have been releasing about this theme. And we're here to support you however we can, because the international support is very helpful in this process so that the human rights of women are respected everywhere. Now I'd like to call Litsi, Congresswoman Litsi.
O microfone da deputada Litsi está fechado.
Litsi's microphone was off. After the considerations, I'd like to register the participation of some male deputies here who just showed up. Reginaldo Lopes, Valdenor Pereira. We're very glad to receive them here. And through my script, I'd like to call now.
Saudação.
We'll have a brief moment, a brief speech from all the other congresswomen who are here present. We'll have a few minutes to speak. If no one wants to speak, then we'll pass the word to the people who are invited to be here, the deputies and the specialists. I'd like to ask Deputy Carmen Zanotto if she would like to speak right now.
Deputada Litsi, Deputada Rosaneide.
Deputy Litsi, Deputy Rosaneide, in a maximum of 3 minutes. I'd like to thank this moment of this important debate. We have a big fight to enhance the representation of women, not only in the chamber and in the Senate, but also in the states and in the cities, and also in the executive power, because it's very important, the participation of women in all the spaces. I'd like to congratulate you for this moment, for this exchange of experiences. We renovate our hope in this moment to enhance the number of women next year in the elections and the participation of women, to have at least a representative from each state inside the Chamber of Deputies. I'll be here watching so I can understand better their experiences there, so we can advance here. It can help us in the political reform that we might have this year, maybe next year. Thank you, Deputy Carmen. I'd like to pass the word to Deputy Rosaneide. Thank you, Deputy Litsi. Deputy Carmen. We will now pass the word to our first deputy, international deputy from Argentina. How Argentina has now more women in the parliament. We're very glad to have here Cristina Brits, who will speak for about 15 minutes. You may now have the word.
todas, a todos, muchísimas gracias por la invitación. Para nosotros también es un placer y una alegría poder compartir con ustedes. Le cuento que esta argentina vive en la provincia de Misiones, que queda pegada por Foz de Iguazú. Así que tenemos mucho en común con ustedes, hermanas brasileras. Compartimos muchas cosas en común. En principio, quiero agradecer al Observatorio del Sur Global de Argentina por esta invitación, a Mariana Vázquez, a Fede Montero.
She's saying hello to everybody, and she wants to thank you to calling us. She's from Argentina. She's saying thank you for the Secretary of Human in the Chamber of Brazil inviting her.
Que es para su país en este momento debatir esto y lograr espacios de igualdad en la representación de la mujer.
That in Brazil is changing and is going to the equality of the.
La lucha legislativa, si bien ha tenido después de 30 años de una larga lucha, no culminó. Les digo que nosotras, las diputadas, las parlamentarias,
after lots of fight of Argentina human, we change everything in our politics.
Como les digo, con la puesta en práctica de la ley 27.
We change the law.
Política,
and we change the representation of the human in the parliament.
Una de las primeras que sancionó
was one of the first countries to do the equality in the parliament. In 1991, we changed the law to have the same representation of the human and males in the politics.
Hasta el año 2001, en que la elección comenzó a ser
until the 2001,
a través de sucesivas reglamentaciones que resultaron claves para evitar
I did again.
de las estructuras partidarias y asegurar la postulación.
And we changed the structure of the parties. Most of the parties Argentinos have the representation, the human representation.
Se puede, que si no es obligatorio, no hay una sanción, no lo hacen los hombres.
We don't have the obligation of to have the same part of human and males in the parties.
La representación, pero
this is something that's growing in the culture
del Congreso.
We have the equilibration of in the composition of the males and the humans in the parliament.
A nuestras compañeras, el acceso a las mujeres, a estas y otras instituciones de la vida pública y política de la Argentina. Bueno, la paridad
the politics life in Argentina, it's different because we have the equality of the males and females.
Un amesetamiento.
We have the parity law in the Congress to have the most of the number of male and female the same. This one law we started 300 years ago. The studies for doing this law.
Bueno, lo que no podemos negar y sí es muy importante es que el cupo permitió aumentar la cantidad de las mujeres, de las compañeras en la...
It's important to say that we have to grow the most of the human in the parliament. We have to change our agenda.
Casi compuesto en su totalidad por hombres. La inclusión
because we have the parliament composed most of the party of males.
Hasta ese momento.
We have this discourse
de nuestra experiencia social, por lo que la ley de
we have
paridad
experience in the society.
A nuestras instituciones.
We have this experience in
Hemos dado un impulso a numerosas normas para subsanar muchas situaciones.
and we have many points that we follow to have this debate. I'm sorry.
De los derechos humanos en general y de las mujeres en particular, obviamente. Bueno, después, en definitiva, y siguiendo el espíritu del artículo 37 de nuestra Constitución Nacional de la Argentina, el Estado
Has one article, 37 article in the Constitution, that we have the equality of human and male
positiva. El
in
Congreso
most of the places in the government.
de paridad de género para las listas
It's
de
a
cargos
parity, it's a equality, gender, law.
a partir de esta nueva ley.
After this new law,
De ambas cámaras se desarrollan en
we change, we refresh the Congress of Argentina because we have to put in the same place the males and females.
que las listas de candidatos que se presenten para la elección
And
de senadores,
And the candidate, I don't know, and the
de manera intercalada, mujeres y varones. Desde el primer candidato hasta el titular, hasta el último candidato o candidata suplente, o sea, un hombre, una mujer. Un hombre,
I was in Argentina, like if you have a part with a male to be the government or the president, we have to have a female to be the person that is going to make the substitution. Sorry.
Paridad de género. Desde entonces, 6 países de la región, incluido la Argentina, tuvieron esta reforma electoral. Pero lo más
So, Argentina, we changed these elections.
un aspecto fundamental que se establece como requisito para la existencia de los partidos políticos también, que se respete la
So
paridad.
the parts have to have the same quantity, same number of the males and females in every election, like if a president, if a government, the deputies.
Elección con paridad para el bienio 2019-2021.
In 2019, we have the first election in Argentina with the same the equality of males and females.
En comparación con la legislatura anterior del 2017-2019.
If you make a comparison of the law in 10 years ago and now, we have change of this composition of the chamber.
Elecciones, compañeras.
So, we have to have more elections to see if this process is going to continue.
Bueno, compañeras, espero que nuestro apoyo
well, friends, I hope everybody like the information about the Argentina and have a good meeting.
Muito feliz em verificar que, apesar das dificuldades, ampliou o parlamento.
I'd like to thank a lot Deputy Cristina. We had now a bigger representation of women there, even though it was a tough path, and that the society understands that women are very important to the society. And then there's a
she's
question
talking
of
about
parity
the amount
of
of
gender inside the
the
party,
females in the government.
which is here also a problem for us. And the example of Argentina will help here. The deputy who is giving the opinion for the bill, and then will inspire a lot in the example of Argentina so that Brazil can develop. In this moment, I'll give the floor to the Senator Andrea, who will explain for us the electoral model of Bolivia. You have 15 minutes. We're very glad to have a senator here. A senator who
formada em filosofia e
has struggled a lot and has a big curriculum. She was an artist. She has a PhD. And her focus is the development of startups and the development of new initiatives that happen digitally. Besides that, she also has problems inside of technological education. We are also focused in this in Brazil. Andrea initiated in political activism. Especially in the referendum, constitutional referendum in 2016.
Apesar de ganhar o processo eleitoral, as eleições foram anuladas.
Even though she won the electoral process, the elections were annullated. Right now, she's the head of the party for citizen community. I'm sorry, Ms. Drew, this part is very fast. For us, it's a bit difficult. But we'll pass everything for you later if we can. This is a matter that worries all of us here in Brazil. We're very glad to now receive her. Now I'll pass to Andrea for 15 minutes.
Muchísimas gracias, diputada Rosa. Diputada Lindsay.
Thank you, Deputada. Thank you for the invitation from Secretary. I want to share everything with the Secretary.
La conquista de los derechos de la mujer es una conquista de todas.
We have the...
Entiendo.
Sorry.
Ha pasado en Argentina, lo que ha pasado en Chile.
The
lo que
fight of the humans, it's the fight of the... Everybody to have the rights to live in the equality.
Tener la posibilidad de emitir un voto. En los años 40, el debate estaba enfocado a un voto privilegiado.
In the 40 age, in 1940, we have the women with different works. And in 52, we have a revolution in Bolivia. We change many things with human.
Bolivia empieza a ser un estado plurinacional en el año 2009. Después
de la 2009, Bolivia changed because...
Pero sigue manteniendo la forma de república. En este sentido, también tenemos dos cámaras, la Cámara de Senadores.
We have a republic like Brazil with the Congress. And we have the equality of males and females in the Congress. It's
ya cuando Domitila Chungara hacía su primera participación en Naciones Unidas, defendiendo la posibilidad que debe tener la mujer y las diferencias que existen entre las diferentes mujeres que habemos en el mundo. En Bolivia tenemos un marco normativo que avanzó significativamente desde la nueva Constitución Política del Estado.
In Bolivia, we have a new constitution from 1947. We have the conditions of the human different because we guaranteed we guaranteed the same positions of humans.
En la ley 26.
In the law 26.
Igualdad de oportunidades entre mujeres y hombres.
We have the law in the election that we have the equality of the males and females in the elections. In 26 law in the
también tenemos lo que es el principio de equivalencia, que
election. Sorry, it's very fast.
Se establece que la participación ciudadana también debe ser equitativa con igualdad de condiciones. Que las
She's
listas
talking about the equality of gender in the elections. Sorry, it's very fast, but she's talking about this. She's talking about the many places in the government, like state and country and communities. We have the structure of the same number of genders.
Lo que es un avance altamente significativo para la democracia boliviana, ¿no?
She's talking about now how Bolivia is growing with many women in the public positions. And we also have transgender politics.
Esta posibilidad en la Asamblea Legislativa desde la anterior gestión de trabajar en paridad y alcanzar mínimamente el 48% de representatividad nos ha permitido
trying to get the 48% of the number of the human in the elections. We tried this number.
La ley 243 surge a partir del asesinato de una concejal en una provincia en la ciudad de La Paz, de Juana
We
Quispe.
changed the law after a murder of a human that's working in the representative in politics. I didn't get it.
No solamente leyes para la paridad o las cuotas de género. Como lo decían bien ustedes, las reformas deben ser estructurales y altamente educativas. No podemos simplemente decir de hoy en adelante van en igualdad de condiciones 50% hombres y 50% mujeres, porque es el sistema excesivamente...
We try doing the 50% of male and 50% of females. But it's difficult because we have the violence against humans in the public sectors.
La violencia contra la mujer. Tenemos la 1173, que es la ley de procedimiento penal que abrevia los procesos cuando se trata de feminicidios, pero que al final del día terminan siendo leyes obsoletas. ¿Por qué? Porque
Well,
no
our laws, it's not new laws. It's very old. We have to change the law regarding the numbers of males and females in the politics.
Por ley tenemos que entrar a un porcentaje de la propaganda que se usa, pero eso no nos da derecho a que sea yo como mujer la figura principal de la campaña política. Entonces, nosotros...
We change about sorry.
Creo que el debate fundamental, no solamente en Brasil, sino en el continente en su conjunto, está en poder generar...
It's not only in Brazil. It's most of the part of the continent.
de nuestros pares masculinos.
That we work to all the countries have the same of the amount of the human in the politics.
temas de derechos humanos.
And we have to have the many other important things like human.
Dentro de las estructuras de los partidos políticos, la normativa queda como un buen adorno. Otro dato importante en Bolivia. Bolivia es uno de los países que más ha avanzado en materia de igualdad y paridad, sin lugar a duda, pero lamentablemente esto solo se ve y se evidencia en los órganos legislativos. Los órganos
That's important because Bolivia is one of the countries that they have the parity, like human and male in the same amount, but it's only in legislative.
Ocupan cargos. Hay 55
it's not in all the spheres of the Republic. Have 7 chairs in the chamber, and from these 7 chairs, 3 it's woman.
No hay una sola mujer ejerciendo un cargo de gobernadora.
When we regarded the communities, small cities, we don't have the human front of the government.
Como en el poder legislativo, como en el poder.
Well, we don't have the amount of human in legislative, executive, justice. We have only in the chambers this amount of the human.
Es que cuando no hay presupuesto, no se puede avanzar. Cuando no hay voluntad política de nuestros pares masculinos, tampoco se puede avanzar.
She's saying that we don't have, when a country doesn't have equality of gender, we have to fight against this. We have to have attention regarding this.
Entonces,
so I hope we have a debatation of this disparity of human and males in the politics.
Mi papá, de hecho, nació allá. Entonces,
she's saying that she has a father that's born in Brazil and she really likes Brazil.
Y eso siempre va a ser.
She hopes Brazil can fight to get this gender with the same amount of human and male in the politics.
Desde nuestra normativa y nuestra experiencia. Muchísimas gracias.
She's saying thank you to share her experience from her government to everybody.
I'd like to thank the senator. Gave us this beautiful example from the country. Andrea, you're very young, and you bring a beautiful example. I'm talking here from the state of Mato Grosso, which is a neighbor of Bolivia here. I'd like to invite you, after the pandemic, to come here to talk about the parity that you have there and talk here in our state. It's a great speech. Thank you so much for your contribution. I'd like to pass to Deputy Litsi.
Boa tarde novamente.
Good afternoon again. Rosa, through my script, I'd like to call now the deputy that represents Chile, Ms. Claudia. So you can tell us a bit about your experience. I'd like to know if you're present and confirm if she's the next person invited here to speak. Let's check if she's here with us.
Se a deputada Cláudia ainda não estiver, pode chamar a próxima, Lidia.
If Deputy Claudia it's not here, you can call the next one. The next one, it's now Tatiana Dias-Rey, to talk about the model of Uruguay, the electoral model of Uruguay, a close country that is very dear.
She's saying hello to our friends from many countries, and to say thank you.
Diputadas de todos los países de la región que están participando hoy. Y bueno, después de escuchar un poco a las compañeras de Argentina, a las compañeras bolivianas,
She wants to share with it.
en el caso uruguayo, el resto de los países de la región son el espejo en el que nos miramos permanentemente, ¿verdad? Nosotros, si bien somos reconocidos como un país muy chiquito, que en los últimos años de gobierno progresista tuvo un gran florecer en términos de lo que fue la agenda de derechos sexuales y reproductivos, de derechos para las personas trans, matrimonio igualitario. Bueno, vimos también que todo eso hoy, después de muchos años, ha quedado en cuestión y que hay agendas que han quedado en un plano secundario y sin duda la agenda que tiene que ver con la representación política femenina y esta idea que hay del Uruguay progresista por fuera de las fronteras del Uruguay. Bueno, acá cuando empezamos a ver...
It's been saying that the country is considered very small and there's not a lot of attention given to the country because of that. And I will come to the part that she's speaking right now. Uruguay is not a federal state, it's a state that is centralized because there's a few, it's a small population, there are not a lot of electoral numbers. So here you have a system that don't have a lot of changes through the years. When it comes to the system of the parties.
Luego hoy la diputada Liz mencionaba incluso la diferencia.
Today, Deputy Lisi mentioned the asymmetry for the financial part of the campaigns for women. Here, this is a problem because of the strong parties that we have. There's not a lot of financial of money specifically for women.
Para las mujeres, que el principal obstáculo que tienen que sortear para lograr llegar a espacios de representación está en la interna de sus organizaciones políticas. Y por eso
So the biggest challenge for women is inside these political organizations, inside the strong parties.
Eso que no permite que nos despeguemos porque tenemos problemas de origen justamente con
We have many problems that we have to work. We have we talk about many years to change the law.
Como el último de la clase en términos de lo que ha sido el avance en términos de políticas afirmativas para representación femenina en los ámbitos parlamentarios.
She talked about the representation of the human in the parliament, in the government. She's speaking very fast. It's very difficult to make the translate, sorry.
Hubo también, por ejemplo, una reducción de la presencia de mujeres, ¿no?
We have a evolution. We have the evolution because we have more human in the politics. We just approved the law that
es como un parche que vamos renovando permanentemente. Se planteó para el año 2009, se planteó para las elecciones luego del año 2015, finalmente lo extendimos esto al año 2019 en el que se realizaron las últimas elecciones, y lo que vemos acá es que, bueno, que en realidad depende mucho de la correlación de fuerzas que hay adentro de los parlamentos.
We understand here that a lot is needed through the force and the coalitions done inside the parliament, the lobby and everything that is done inside of it and inside the parties. In the case of Uruguay,
hay una responsabilidad muy grande de las organizaciones político-partidarias. Uruguay todavía
we have a different question, a different problem that is because of the representation inside of a small country.
Prácticamente es marginal la participación de candidatas a la presidencia. De hecho,
and we have a problem in the executive for the presidential. The number of women who are candidates are very, very small. So there's not a lot of presence of women who are candidates. Barely none.
De las leyes de cuotas. Eso hay que decirlo también porque hay un dicho.
So there's a small application of the law of quotas that we have inside the country.
Por decirlo de alguna manera, buscamos la forma de sortear las reglamentaciones. Hoy escuchaba a la compañera Cristina Brites
so we're looking for a way to change this law because there are no specific consequences when this criteria and this number of quota of women is not applied.
Nosotros pusimos en la discusión la paridad y sobre todo la paridad en la fórmula presidencial. Esto fue algo que impulsó el Frente Amplio también. Y en el caso del Frente Amplio, que es el partido que hoy...
We talk here about a big front to try to tackle this problem. I'm sorry, ma'am. This is a very difficult one because of her accent.
Ahora, esto nuevamente nos pone frente a otros problemas que son alternativas que se buscan para, de alguna forma u otra, trampear esta ley de cuotas, que tiene que ver, por ejemplo, con el sistema de suplencias, ¿verdad?
Suppleancy system is to say the quantity have to be for men and women is 50-60%, but there's always some mechanism which one it aims to be to better access to the chair of the woman, because this is the representation minimalist application of the scenario, minimum scenario, where the law establishes that if I have a minimum of 30%, more or less, you have plenty. This corresponds to another situation. In this case, in Uruguay, it's a country, middle country, but many people in the metropolitan area. The circumscriptions, it's a field where effective we can see the effect of to applicate the 30% quote in the parliamentary política. Many times what happens is a major part of the electoral circumscriptions is very small, so the party just have one vacancy. When put in the bench with a woman, this woman will not get there. So we also have this way of obligate ourselves how should be this affirmative politics for women from all national territories effectively to participate more than we already had. Well, difficulties for participations, many of the women in the great circumscriptions, there are fractures from sexuality. For all congresswomen, Ana Claudia, Andrea, other congresswomen already said that central reasons, it's some stage. We have this affirmative politics. It's clearly we have to start to think the reasons of this inequity of representations. I believe that in this sense, it's very important that we are discussing this with the tools and also have this debate with the application, with the elements we have available to draw these realities, which implicates that women always want the equality. There's other repercussions, for example, with the women's. Less trans, Afro, and young women lack success. Same as the last legislature. 33 years. Person can be elected since there's a younger women, but there are no younger women in these confirmations from the women in the chamber. In this case, as I told, the first difficulty in the origin should put the women to get in the representation spaces. Found the same as representations. Women that during a great part of the reproductive stage, they get out of the politics or the militants, and so we find women who had children, and there's a gap. Which women are getting there in the parliament? So overall, we have some difficulties about the political violence that women suffer. There's not asking for political career to get in the representation space. Imagine yourselves in the condition being young women, the companions, the reality, the university career, and the representation and the local government, for example, the experience I have in the executive spaces. I would like to talk about this experience, Uruguayan experience, so we could open our eyes and see the other side. What is the tools that we have? Many times there are always these parts we should revise in the minimum details for effectively. So we don't want to be a woman discussing in the corner. We want more space. Thank you very much for this invitation. I don't want to extend myself anymore. And sorry for the poor translation. Thanks for the contribution, Deputy Bettina Diaz. We know that Uruguay has many advances in social area, educational area, but we also perceive that there are difficulties in the representation issues. So let's focus in these examples, the good examples, and also in the difficulties, so we can overcome and wish strongly that Uruguay reaches the parity in representation, because this is very important for us. Women in America, we need to advance in large steps. Thank you very much, Bettina, for your contribution. I would like to thank as well Emilia Fernandes, President of Mercosul Women Forum. She was a congresswoman, senator, women's minister. She's with us joining this international seminar. And I also want to thank Deputy Bettina. I invite to speak Congresswoman Yeltsin Perez to talk to us about Costa Rica model. one of the pioneer countries in this experience. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation. And for 15 minutes, we would like to know a little bit about this pioneership in Costa Rica, about participation, women
Muchas
participation
gracias.
in Parliament.
Quiero primero
Thank you very
verificar que me
much.
escuchan bien.
First, do you hear me well?
Sí. Oh, muchas
Yes,
gracias.
they hear you well. Thank you very
Bueno,
much.
muchísimas gracias por la
Well,
oportunidad de
thank you very much
participar en
for this
este
opportunity
espacio.
to participate in this space.
Incorporé tarde porque tenemos 3 horas de diferencia y
Joined
estaba en otro
late
evento.
because 3 hours
Pero
lag.
quería
I
primero
was in
compartirles
another
que nuestra
event.
constitución
First, I'd like to
política
share that our
incluye el
political
principio de
constitution
igualdad entre
includes
mujeres y hombres, y esto ha
the
sido muy
equality
importante
principle
para las
between
mujeres
women and
para
men. It's
agarrarnos
been very
de ese
important for
principio
women
y poder
to
desarrollar
reach,
todas
to
las
hold in
demás
these
luchas que
principles
hemos
and
luchado.
develop all the other
La ley
struggles that we are
electoral
having.
nuestra,
The electorship,
podríamos decir que ha
we
evolucionado
can say
de la
that
cuota mínima del
evolved
40% de
from the
mujeres
minimum quote
a
of 40%
la
women
paridad de género.
to the
Las
parity of
cuotas
gender. The
no
quotes
funcionaron, pero hubo que
worked,
desarrollarlas.
but we have to develop
No
them.
fue como la ley las
It was
consignó,
not
sino
like
como tuvimos que modificarlas
with the law,
a
but we
partir
had
de la
to
práctica,
change
porque
the
el
laws
principal
from
obstáculo
the
que
practice,
tuvimos
because the
fue
main
el de los
obstacle we had,
partidos
it
políticos,
was from the
que
political
siempre
parties
ubicaban a las
that
mujeres en aquellos lugares
always
con menos
put the
posibilidades
women
reales
with
de
less
ser electas.
possibility, real
Hubo que
possibility
ir
to
con
be
amparos
elected,
electorales
and
y hubo que ir
always,
con
and also
modificaciones
what to
electorales, y
do
desde
with these electoral modifications. And
1996
since
hasta el
1996
2004
until
aproximadamente,
2004 approximately,
como casi 10 años de desarrollo,
almost
logramos
10
una
years of
cuota mínima de
development, and we
participación
reached the
política que
minimal
al final fue
political
efectiva.
quote
Pero
that
en
was
el
effective.
2009
But in
nos
2009,
trasladamos de esa cuota y
we
nosotras decimos que evolucionamos a
can
la
say that
paridad
we
de
evolved to
género.
a parity, gender
Y
parity,
esa
and
evolución
this
se da
evolution
porque se
gives
incluye en el
because it
código
includes
electoral
in the electoral code
primero
first
el principio
the principle
de la paridad de género.
of
Se
gender
incluye
parity.
la participación
It
política
includes the
como
political
un
participation
principio de la
as a
democracia y de
principle
nuestro
of
sistema electoral.
democracy
También
principle and electoral system.
Introduce
Also
la paridad de
introduces
género
the
como
gender
una
parity
definición.
as a
Y esa
definition,
definición es que
and
para
this
órganos
definition is for
uninominales, la diferencia entre
organs,
hombres y
one
mujeres
names,
no
the
puede ser
difference
superior
between
a 1.
men and women
Y para
cannot be
órganos plurinominales,
more than
esa
one,
diferencia
and
entre hombres
for
y mujeres
plurinominal
es igual a
organs, the
0.
difference
Es decir,
is
misma
equal to
cantidad de
0,
hombres y
is
misma
to say the
cantidad
same
de
quantity
mujeres.
of women, the
Además,
same
la
quantity
paridad
of
se
women.
aplica
The
en
parity
todos los
also
órganos del
applies
partido
to
político,
all
en
political
su
party
estructura,
organs in its
en
structure,
las listas
in
o
the
nóminas
lists,
para
nominal lists
elección
for
popular y
popular
también se
elections, and
aplica en
also
la
applies
capacitación.
in the
Entonces,
capacitation.
quiero compartirles,
So I
nosotros
would like to
tenemos
share
un
to you, we
sistema
have
de
a
votación,
votation system
en el caso
since
de la proporcionalidad,
days of
por
proportionality.
ejemplo, para las
For example,
diputaciones,
for the
todos los
deputation,
partidos
so
políticos
all
están
the
obligados
political parties
a
are
cumplir la
obliged
alternancia y la
to
paridad.
have
La
alternance and
alternancia
parity.
es el
The
mecanismo
alternancy
que
is
se
the
define
mechanism
en la ley.
which
Porque
defines
si algo
is
aprendimos
defined
con la
in the
lucha
law,
de
because
cuotas es
if
que
we
había
learn
que
something
definir el
to the quota
mecanismo en la ley.
struggle is to define
Entonces,
the law
definimos que era
mechanism.
la
So we
alternancia,
define that the
una
alternancy,
paridad de género con
the
alternancia.
gender
Y
parity and the
todos los
alternancy,
órganos,
and all
a
the
todos los
organs
niveles,
in
tienen
all
que tener
levels has to have
esa alternancia
this
y esa
alternancy,
paridad.
this change, alternancy,
Entonces,
right?
las
And this
listas
parity, and the
tienen que ir
lists
encabezadas
has
por
to go
mujeres, después
uh,
hombres, después mujeres,
first
después
women,
hombres,
then
y
men,
van
first, and
encabezadas por
after
hombres,
women,
después
and
mujeres.
if the list has the first
Eso
is
lo
a man,
logramos en el
after should
2009
be a
y
woman.
en este
It
momento
happened since
tenemos en la Asamblea
2009, and
Legislativa
now we
un
have in the
46%
Legislative
de
Assembly
mujeres diputadas.
46%
Es
of
la primera
congresswomen.
vez que tenemos
The
ese
first
porcentaje.
time we have this
Anteriormente habíamos
percentage.
logrado
Before that,
hasta un
we
38%.
had
Pero
reached
es con la paridad, con la
38%.
aplicación de la
But
paridad
with the
vertical
parity
y
application,
horizontal,
vertical
que
parity and
logramos ese
horizontal parity,
46%.
we have
pero es producto de
46%,
la lucha
but
de
this
todas
is the
las mujeres.
product of
Porque
the all women
el
struggle,
Tribunal Electoral,
because the
que es el
electoral
máximo
tribunal,
órgano
which
en nuestro país en
the
materia
higher
de
organ in
administración
our
y
country in
organización de las
matter of
elecciones,
administration
pero
and
además tiene
selection and
competencia de
organization,
juez electoral
they
y en
have
la
the
última
competence,
instancia
electoral competence, and the
en
last
materia
instance
de
in
justicia,
matter of
en materia
justice,
electoral, no nos
in
daba la razón sobre la aplicación de la
matters,
paridad de género
they have this
en los
application of gender
encabezamientos de la
parity
lista.
in the
Entonces
top of the
acudimos a la
lists.
sala
So,
constitucional y la sala
we
constitucional
reached
reconoce el
the
derecho y
constitutional
reconoce
level,
la
and the
legislación y
Constitution
reconoce que la
recognizes
legislación hay que aplicar la
the
paridad
right
horizontal
and
en
the
los encabezamientos.
parity and the
Entonces, por primera vez en el 2018,
horizontal
los
parity
partidos
and
políticos se
the
vieron en
top
la
of the list.
obligación
From
de,
2018, the
de las
political
7
parties
provincias,
has
7
the
grandes
obligation
departamentos que
from
tenemos,
the 7
los
provinces we
partidos
have,
políticos
the
nacionales
political
que
parties
postulaban por
national
las 7 provincias
who wanted the
tenían
7
que
provinces, they had
encabezar
to
en
put on the top of the
3
list
provincias
in
mujeres,
3
en 3
provinces
provincias
women,
hombres
3
y en una
provinces
provincia
men, and
cualquiera
in
de los dos
one,
géneros.
province,
Y
each,
si no lo
any
hacían
of the
así,
genders.
el
If they
Tribunal
didn't do
Electoral
that, the
organizaba el
electoral tribunal
encabezamiento.
did that.
Si los partidos políticos no
If the
cumplen la
political
paridad,
party did not
no logran
agree,
inscribir
they
sus
cannot
órganos o sus
subscribe
nóminas
their organs or their names
al órgano electoral.
for the
Entonces se
electoral
quedan sin
organ.
inscribir
So
y se
if they
quedan sin
want to
participar.
participate,
Esa es la
if they
principal
want to,
sanción por la cual
they
ellos se
have
ven
this
obligados.
sanction. They
También
are
tenemos
obliged
paridad
to
de
do
género
that.
en la
We also
capacitación.
had gender
Y
parity
hay
in
obligación de
capacitation.
dar
There's
capacitación en
obligation
temas como
to
derechos
give
humanos,
capacitation in
democracia e
human
igualdad de
rights,
género. Y
democracy, and
también
gender equality. And
hay
also,
una acción
there are
afirmativa para capacitación solo
affirmative
a
action
mujeres
for
para el
capacitation only
empoderamiento de las
women
mujeres.
for
Y en toda
empowering
acción de
women.
capacitación se tiene que
All
garantizar
capacitation
que
action
hubo
has
una
to
convocatoria
assure
amplia para
the
garantizar una
the broad
representación importante de
invitation to have a great
Hemos
representation of women.
avanzado
We
en
have
puestos
advanced
plurinominales,
in
no así
plurinominal
en puestos uninominales.
jobs and also in
Hemos decidido solo una mujer
uninominal
presidenta.
jobs
Y
with
a nivel de las municipalidades
presidents
solo
and
tenemos
also in
12% de mujeres.
the
Es
districts we have
importante
12%
también
of
plantear que
women.
también
It's
tenemos la
important
paridad de género
also to
en
have
otros
that we have the
órganos.
gender parity in other
La primera
organs.
ley fue del
The
2000
first
en un
law
órgano
in 2000
de las y
in
los
organ
trabajadores, es un
from
banco de
the
las y los
workers'
trabajadores
organs.
que tiene la paridad de género.
They have
También
the gender
nuestra
parity.
legislación en
Also
materia de
our
organizaciones
legislation in matter
sindicales,
of
de
syndical
asociaciones de desarrollo de las
organizations and
comunidades,
the community
asociaciones
associations,
solidaristas, y estamos trabajando
solidarity
también para que las
associations, and
cooperativistas tengan
also
también
in
la
the
paridad en su
cooperativists
legislación.
associations
Hemos
has
logrado
the
avanzar
parity
hacia un
in their
gobierno
legislations. We
paritario
have
y
reached
la
this government
designación de
with
mujeres
parity,
en el Ejecutivo
and
como
executive
ministras,
women
como
as ministers,
directoras
directors,
con puestos importantes de toma de decisiones, ha oscilado entre un
important
40 y un
decision posts,
60%. Estamos
around
avanzando
40 and
también para
60%.
poder
We are
introducir
also
la
advancing
paridad
in
de género en
introducing the
nuestra
gender
constitución
parity in our
política
political
de cara a
constitution,
una democracia paritaria. Pero lo más
paritary
importante es que
democracy.
estamos
But the
claras de que
most
queremos
important,
la
we are
paridad
clear,
en todo,
we want
en
the parity in
absolutamente
everything,
todo.
in absolutely
Hemos
every
logrado
every
también
area.
avanzar con
We
el número de
also
mujeres
advanced
magistradas.
in the
Sin embargo, en los
magistrated
últimos
women.
años se ha estancado,
Past
inclusive ha habido un
years,
retroceso.
we have a
Porque
little retrocess.
los máximos órganos de la
Because
justicia
the justice
están siendo
higher
muy
organs are being
apetecidos desde el ejercicio del poder. Entonces
they
tenemos
want
que
so much
fortalecer
the power,
nuestra
so we have to
presencia en esos espacios.
reinforce
Y
our
el mayor
place in this
número de
space.
mujeres
So the
en la Asamblea
most
Legislativa ha
women,
contribuido
the
a
major
que haya
numbers
un
of
mayor número de mujeres
women in
también
the assemblies
magistradas y
assured
mujeres
that
electas en
more
diferentes puestos de
magistrated
elección.
women
Pero tenemos que
in
avanzar
different posts,
sustantivamente
but we
en
have
que
to
las mujeres que
advance
lleguemos
more,
a estos
that
órganos
the
lleguemos
women
con
who gets to
conciencia
this
de
organ
género.
gets there
Y
with
lleguemos
the
también
gender
mujeres
conscious,
jóvenes,
because we also
tan
have
valientes como todas
younger
las mujeres jóvenes de
women
la
so
región.
brave
También estamos avanzando con la discusión en el plenario en este momento de un proyecto de ley
plenary,
contra la violencia a las mujeres
law
en la
project
política,
against
con
the
sanciones claras
violence
y
against
con
women in
medidas claras para la
politics,
prevención y
with
la
clear
erradicación de
measures
esta
and
forma de violencia
prevention
contra las mujeres.
from this kind of
En nuestro
violence
país,
against women.
la
In
Asamblea
our country,
Legislativa
the
ha venido
Legislative
también
Assembly
avanzando
also
de un
advanced
sistema
from a
de
system
bipartidismo a un sistema
from two parties
pluripartidista.
to the
Mi partido, el Partido
parties,
Acción
many
Ciudadana, es
parties.
responsable de esa ruptura del
Responsibility.
bipartidismo
So
cuando
her party is responsible for this
se
break of this
presenta por primera vez
bipartidarism.
en el 2002 a
It
las
represents the
elecciones
first time of election
de este país
2012
y
of this
logra una
country.
importante bancada y
It's
además
an
tiene
important
el
bench.
gobierno los últimos 2
The
años.
government
Sin
in the last
embargo,
12
es
years,
importante
it's
reconocer
important to
que
recognize
la pluralidad,
that the
que el
plurality
multipartidismo
in many
genera
parties
muchísimos retos de diálogo, de
gave
negociación,
us
de
many
gobernanza,
ways of
donde las
dialogue,
mujeres tenemos que aportar
negotiations,
lo
and
mejor que
governorship.
tenemos
The
y
women
estamos
could
aportando
bet on the
muchísimo
best that they
desde
have.
también
And
nuestras
we are
habilidades blandas,
also
producto de la
in
socialización de
the
género, a la
socialization of
negociación.
gender and
Hay
the
temas
negotiations
durísimos como
as
presupuestos
very hard
públicos,
themes like
finanzas públicas, las finanzas
finances,
para estados sanos,
finance for
estado laico,
states,
derechos
the
sexuales y
late
derechos
state,
reproductivos de las mujeres,
sexual
la
rights for
interseccionalidad.
women,
No hemos tenido
intersectionality.
en la historia de este país ninguna
We
mujer ni
haven't in the
ningún
story
hombre
of
indígena
this
en la
country
Asamblea Legislativa.
any women
Tenemos que
in
avanzar
the
para esa
legislative
gran
assembly. We have
interseccionalidad
to have the
de las luchas.
intersectionality.
Por
It's
los
true.
resultados nos
The
hemos
results,
caracterizado como
it's
un país que ha
characterized
logrado
as a
ir avanzando
country
en materia de
and
participación política
advancing
de las
in
mujeres,
political
pero aún tenemos
participation of
muchos
women,
pendientes,
but
especialmente
we
en
also
los
had
puestos
some loss.
uninominales. Y
The
ocupamos mujeres que
uninominal
tomen los partidos
have
políticos,
to have
mujeres con mucho
women who
poder
take
al
the
interno de los
political
partidos
parties,
políticos. En Costa
much
Rica los
power in the
partidos
political
políticos
parties.
tienen
In
el
Costa
monopolio
Rica,
para la
the political
representación
parties have the
política.
monopoly
Aquí
for their political
no hay otra
representation.
vía para
There
llegar
are no
a los
other
puestos de
way
elección
to
popular que
get
no sea
in
por medio de
the
los partidos políticos.
popular
Y es vital que las
posts
mujeres
instead
estemos ahí,
of the
estemos
political
con
parties.
poder para que
So
podamos
to have this
participar
power
de lleno.
to join
El poder
this.
económico
The
también es un
economical
factor que
power is a factor
limita, pero
which
las redes
limitates
sociales también
the
contribuyen mucho
social
a la
media,
visibilización,
always
aunque
contributes for
también
the
las redes
visibilizations.
sociales
Also the
han
social
sido
media
objeto de muchísima
are object of many
difusión de
diffusion
noticias
of
falsas,
news,
de
fake news,
desinformación, que también
disinformation,
ha atentado
in
contra la
tempting
democracia que tenemos.
against
Yo dejo mi
the
intervención acá
democracy.
y estoy dispuesta para más preguntas.
Is here
Muy
available. She's
obrigada.
available for
Muchas gracias.
for any questions. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, our companion, Costa Rica. Your example, your country's example inspires us when you say to get with gender conscious to the parliament. Show us a way, a path we have to go. In many countries, but here in Brazil especially, I'm sure that our Congresswoman Renata Abreu, who joins us, is surely collecting these beautiful experiences. I think Costa Rica gives us a great example. Besides, they have new accomplishments to do. Your walk is in large steps, and we are going to mirror in your examples for our advances as well. Thank you very much. And to the end, we're going to speak a little bit more. Great speech, great contributions. Thank you very much. I'd like to Erika Kokai, to great warrior, partner, Parliament, Brazilian partner for the political space of women. Erika Kokai is here with us. Thank you very much. We are going to check if the Chilean companion already entered. She was coming. She's here, I think.
espanhol, mas nós gostaríamos de mais uma vez convidar para fazer uso da palavra.
I'd like to invite once more Deputy Claudia Mitz for 15 minutes to
Entrou a nossa deputada Cláudia Mitz.
Here, Claudia Mitz, to satiate.
Não, ela não conseguiu entrar ainda, deputada.
Tá. Então,
Come yet. So let's continue with the list. Back to the speech for Rosa Neide.
Estamos aguardando a deputada Cláudia. Ela já fez contato.
Claudia, Congresswoman, made contact and she's going to enter in this moment. I give the speech to the Swedish researcher, author, and gender coach to speak to us about these models. Right, Drude Darler to be with us, and she has 15 minutes. Drude, you have the word. Thank you very much for your presence. You are sure going to bring a great contribution to our seminary. You are muted, Drude. Sorry. Drude, you have to open your microphone. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the invitation. And it's a great honor to come after Costa Rica, which has such a fantastic gender quota system, and I've had it for a long time. I will share a screen, and I hope it will succeed in doing this. Here we are. Right? Can you see it?
Yes.
Yes. Very good. Sorry, I don't speak Spanish and I don't speak Portuguese, so you'll get this in English, right? So I'm a professor of political science, and my field is, I've been doing lots of research on gender and politics and about the women's movement. And I'm also an international advisor on quota systems and electoral systems. And I have been advisor for the UN, for the Interparliamentary Union, other organizations in countries like Bhutan, Tunisia, Egypt, Costa Rica, Ivory Coast. Not in any Latin American countries, because you can do this by yourself, right? So I'm just see how it works to get another one. No. I do it like this then. No. That's strange. Yep, here we are. So now we're talking about women's representation in Parliament in the whole world. And we have, of course, to start by saying there has been a very interesting development and an increase in women's representation in most, all regions of the world. If you look here at the world average, it was in 2097 only 11.7%, and today it's 25.6%. It is, of course, an increase. But at the same time, women have 25.6% of all the seats in the world's parliament. That means that men have 74.4%. So it's still a very male-dominated political world. But you have to be very proud about Latin America, since you can see Americas is the highest region in terms of women's representation, now on 32.2, and it's not North America, it's absolutely Latin America who is doing this work. And I mean, right now we have 5 countries, right, over 40% in Latin America, which is very impressive. I come from the Nordic Scandinavian countries, and we have an average of 42%. But when people ask us, how long time did it take you? I have to answer, we are just celebrating 100 years of women's suffrage, meaning it took us 100 years. And most countries in the world are saying, we are not going to wait 100 years. We are using fast-track politics. And gender quotas is a kind of fast-track policies instead of the Nordic more incremental track policy. So you have Americas, first and foremost Latin America being on the top, and then Europe, then Sub-Saharan Africa, then Asia, then the Middle East and North African region, which came from very low and have had the highest acceleration of all regions. And then at the bottom, you have the Pacifics. There is, as I said, a very interesting development, an increase, but yet politics is still male-dominated. Let me see, what did I do when I managed to change it? Let me see what I did. Oh, I'm not really sure what I did. Here we are. So when I do research and when I do consultancy, I think we also have to look at the position of men. And we have to look at the political institutions. There is, of course, lots of discussion about why women are underrepresented. But I like to turn the question around and asking, why are men overrepresented? Why are men overrepresented? What are the mechanisms behind men's overrepresentation? And there are many factors. One of them being the old boys network, that men control the political parties and they tend to recruit candidates within a very narrow male circles. So when I say, are the political institutions sufficiently inclusive towards women and minorities, of course, the answer is no. And I want us to focus also on the political institutions and how we can change them. So when I'm going around and arguing for gender quotas, which is a very efficient, if it's done in the right way, of course, I think it's a very efficient way to increase women's representation. But it should not be seen as just adding women to an existing system. The most important is that we want affirmative actions to change the mechanisms. That is, that we want to make gender parity sustainable in the long run. So, all over the world, we have a narrow national and global political elite. And here's a quote which I think is very precise. In all countries, the majority of the politicians are men from the ethnic majority group and the social economic elites. This is every country in the world, or almost every country in the world. The majority of politicians are men from the ethnic majority group and for the social economic elites. And it's even worse when you go to the global governance, because global governance, people in global governance come from the top of the national political elite. So what I work is, in my approach, is I'm looking at the goal. What is our goal? What is the diagnosis of the problem? What is our strategy? And what is the effectiveness and the legitimacy, you could add, of our strategy? So what is the goal? When I have been in this business for a long time, when the goal was more women in politics. And now we have the parity, parité, paridad, or full inclusion of women as the normal in all the normative texts, for instance, by United Nations. All the normative texts, meaning 50-50, or I don't know what you think, but sometimes I would say, okay, paridad could be 45, 50-50. And if you take 45, 50-50, at any rate, you would see you have parity in Nicaragua, in Bolivia, in Mexico, but let me see about Argentina. Oh, Argentina is 42, but Costa Rica, 4 countries in Latin America, if you have parity as 45-55. You can also look at the Sustainable Development Goals. This is, in fact, open to interpretation. What does it really mean? and it is very important, Sustainable Development Goals to be achieved before 2030. Ensure women's full and effective participation, meaning representation. This is what I call equality of result. And then it goes on, equal opportunity for leadership. This is what I call equality of opportunity at all levels of decision making, economics, politics, and public life. The Council of Europe only talks about 40%. And then in many countries, I have to add, even also in the Scandinavian countries, with very high representation of women, that many parties leaders tend to see 35% of women, that is equality obtained. That is gender equality, fighting for gender equality is a closed case. And this is really a problem we have in many countries with long, very high women's representation, that many party leaders, especially at local level, say, oh, I got 35% women, so I have gender equality. No, you don't. Gender equality, parity is at least, I would say, 45-55. So the diagnosis, and let me tell you about the case of Bhutan. I was a consultant in Bhutan, and I said, it's a new democracy, and they said, okay, now everything is free. Why do we have so few women elected? And even the women's organization said, the problem is that women do not vote for women. And I hear that in Malta. I even heard it in Brazil, some people saying this. And every time they say that, they blame the women for women's low representation. And I always ask them, how do you know? Don't you have secret voting? How do you know how voters vote? How do you know how men and women voters vote? And the fact is, you need survey data for that. And I don't know if any of the Latin American countries have this kind of survey data. We had one interesting one from Finland, and the problem is the men. The men vote for men, and the women vote for both men and women candidates. So don't blame the women. You should blame the political parties who control where they put the women in loser districts or in good districts for the party. Where are the women placed on the electoral list, in the PR systems, etc., etc. So I want to change the discussion, and I guess that most of you do the same, from women's alleged lack of qualifications and political interest to a focus on political parties and political institutions. The political parties are the real gatekeepers to elected positions and to many appointed positions as well, like government, but also, councils, commissions, lots of things are being controlled by political parties. So the strategies we all use, and there are many names here: affirmative action, positive action, temporary special measure, gender quotas. And the new trend is that gender quotas is not just for elected assemblies, but also, and I guess that's the case in Costa Rica, for public commissions, for corporate boards. At present, you see a diffusion from one area to another. And we even now have corporate quotas. For instance, Norway have a rule that 40% of all who are sitting on the boards of the companies should be women or men. That is a maximum of 60 and minimum of 40. So today, 42% of all members of the private and public companies on the boards of the private and public companies in Norway are women. Whereas in Denmark, where they don't have any rules, really it's only about 20%. And there's lots of people who are very angry about affirmative action, and I would just say that if everything was fair in society, there was no need for affirmative action, including gender quotas. And that's what I like what the Australian researcher Carol Backey has said. She's arguing that affirmative action is not special help for outgroups like women or minorities. It's an attempt to redress entrenched privilege. It's a way to do away with the privilege that those who control the political system have had for so many years. There's a new concept going around now, which is called bias blockers, and I like that. And what does that mean? Well, we know there are a lot of prejudice against women. There are a lot of structural barriers against women in politics. And we can wait 100 years to have those prejudices going away, but we can also jump over them, if I may use this metaphor. For instance, if you talk about the private companies, we're asking, you can have a law, the headhunter, or you cannot have the leader of a company would say that the headhunters for new positions in the leadership should come up with both men and women candidates. We're not waiting for the bias to go away, but we are just jumping away and say, okay, you need to come up with both men and women candidates. And that's the same for political parties. They say, oh, women don't want the blah, 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 and the voters don't like women. No, we make a block, we block the prejudice and say, you have to have, for instance, 50% women candidates and 50% men candidates. And by the way, it's about the 30% and the 40% and the 45%. I think we are on the way to 50%, are we not? And then I would say, never say positive discrimination, because it is not discrimination. Affirmative action is not discrimination. It's a way to doing away with discrimination. Yeah, that went too fast here. 2/3 of the world's countries make use of some kind of electoral gender quotas. Around 90 by law, and here, of course, Latin America is a big example of having quotas by law. The Scandinavian countries is individual parties. This is what we call, number one, voluntary party quotas. South Africa, ANC also. Legislative candidate quotas, number two, that is typically Latin America, but Phoenician, Italy, etc. And then we have the reserved seats. That is that certain seats are all in advance reserved for women, usually in the constitution. Rwanda, a good example, Morocco. And most newly adopted in Malta. And I hear that you're discussing the same thing in Brazil. And of course, this is the problem when in those systems like Brazil or also Malta, when you have open list systems. It's much more easy to make a quota system if the party decides the order of the election. They come up with a candidate list with number 1, 2, and 3. If they get 3 seats, all those 3, number 1, 2, or 3 are elected. But in open seats, like in Brazil, the voters have a big say. Like Denmark, like Malta, this is much more complicated. So I was just so amazed because I had a webinar in Malta and 2 days after in Brazil, and both countries were trying to do a reserved seat system, type run-off system, that you take a certain number of those women who were part of the election, but were those who got the highest percentage of votes without getting elected. And that's how you get those reserved seats. The most important about reserved seats is that those women who are on reserved seats are being elected or selected by election, not just appointment, because you don't have any legitimacy. It's also very important that they have been known in advance. In Kenya, for instance, you have reserved 47 seats reserved for women, but those women have not been part of the election. They just come from lists that the parties have made before the election. And then suddenly they are there in the parliament, and they don't have much power. They don't have a power base, and they don't have legitimacy because they haven't been part of the election. So it's extremely important how you make, if in Brazil you're going to do this, how you're going to make this kind of system, how you're going to fill the reserve systems, not just adding the women, but also changing the system in general. So here we have the top of the world rank order, and we all know that Rwanda since 2003 has been at number 1, And for Latin America, we have Nicaragua with parity. We have Mexico with parity. We have Bolivia with parity. And now also Argentina is coming along with the 42%. And Brazil is number 141, or I think today is 147. Here you have a map of all the quota systems in the world, and you can see the blue are what we call reserved seats. You have some certain number of seats, for instance, in Jordan, 15 seats for women, in Morocco, 60 seats for women, reserved for women in advance. And the question is, how are they elected? And then we have the green. You can see all Latin America, the green, the legal gender quota system. And then the gray is the voluntary party quotas, which is typical of the Scandinavian one, Australia, Canada, where some parties, usually the party on the left, have gender quotas. And then we have the red, which are all United States, Russia, many others don't have any kind of quota. There's a lot of discussion about gender quotas and how does it work. I would say, yes, I can construct a gender quota system.
De cotas de género en la política.
Sorry? What was that, translator? Sorry.
Sorry, Bird.
What was the comment?
I think was interference for Spanish translation. Sorry, okay? Let's continue.
Okay. So there are lots of people who are discussing to what extent gender quotas work. And I would say there are many gender quota systems which are unambitious. They have very, very low ambitions. They don't work. So it's not a question of whether you are for gender quotas in politics or against it. It's more a question of which kind of gender quotas. And how does you make it suit your electoral systems you already have? And we all know, of course, that the proportional representation systems are much more easy to combine with the quota system. But now countries like Mexico and Bolivia have invented this horizontal gender quota system. So you also can use it for a single member district system, like in the half in Bolivia and the half in Mexico. That is extremely good. So it all depends on the ambition of the quota design. It depends on the rank order rules. Vertical rank order rules, I mean, you can have a rule saying 30% women. I guess you have that in Uruguay. But if all the women are in the bottom of the list, or in districts where the party is very, very weak, you can just forget it. So the civil system, of course, where you have men, women, all through the list is the most efficient one. Then you have to discuss, of course, if you start with a man, you have the women candidates and the male candidates, and you combine them. So you start with the man and the women. And as it was said in Uruguay, the intervention here, that if the parties are very small and only get one, then most of them, then it's very important who is number one. Then it's not enough just to be number two. That was a problem we saw in Tunisia, where they have civil system, fantastic, radical quota rules, but they had 80 parties. They were all new parties, and most of them only got one elected, and 93% of number ones were men. It was only the Islamist party who won 2 or 3 seats in each constituency. So they were, the most of the women elected came from the Islamist party, and the feminists were very disappointed about it. Sanction for non-compliance, very, very important. And what kind of sanctions? Well, the most efficient sanction, which in many Latin American countries is the last one, rejection of the list by the electoral authority. Of course, because political parties want to win an election, and if they can't because they don't comply with the rules, they are usually be given 24 hours or 72 hours or what to comply with. That is the most efficient. Financial penalties, is also in many countries, but if the parties are very rich and the penalty is very low, they are not very efficient. But here comes a new coming up strategy, what we call financial incentives. And that's, first I didn't believe it would work, but we just have Ireland as a very good example. In Ireland, the parties should have 30% women on the list. They also have an open list system to increase to 40% in the next election. And if they don't, the state will cut half of the state financial support for the party. And the parties live from the state support. So half, if they don't comply with the 30% women candidates, they would lose half of the state funding for the party. And all the parties in Ireland suddenly found all the women and put 30% or more women on the list. Before that, they had said, oh, we can't find any women, blah, 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 blah. But when there were money involved, it is extremely important. And it is coming up, and I think that more and more parties are going to use this system. They have it in Georgia also, but it doesn't work because the leading party is led by a billionaire, and he doesn't care about state money. I think I'll have to I will end, and I'll end with this one. There are many people who are, and also among feminists, also many of my feminist colleagues and friends, and somebody mentioned that also, I think it was Rosa, that there are also many women who are against gender quotas. And what are they? What are the arguments? And I would like to mention some as my last intervention here, and argue why I think gender quotas is a very good idea. Some people say that gender quotas only target the symptom of women's underrepresentation, not the causes. My answer is that breaking the tradition of male dominance is a transformation in its own right. But also that if one of the diagnosis of the problem is that the political parties nominate too few women and do not nominate as many women as men in good and safe seats, then gender quotas is in fact targeting the problem, the very problem of the system. We have, of course, a historical prejudice against women and women's all women's work at home and with the family. But when we go to the institutions, the problem is that the parties do not take care of women, are not sufficiently inclusive of women and minorities, that they do not nominate sufficient amount of women, and do not put the women in the safe seats at top of the list and in a good districts. And if that is true, that this is a diagnosis at the institutional level, then I think that gender quotas is in fact targeting that. And also gender quotas can lead to demand for more transparency in the nomination process, what we call the secret garden of nomination, for more transparency and for more formalization of the nomination process. So I think there's a clear effect on the numerical representation of women by gender quotas, if they are made in the right way. But there are also indirect effects on the substantive and symbolic representation of women. It's a big discussion, but meaning the substantive is, do the more women in politics change the legislation? Yes. But of course we know that all women MPs are not feminists. There are also male feminists. But among the women MPs, there are many more feminists than among the men MPs. Symbolic representation, well, that's about what does it mean, for instance, for young girls, that you have a women prime minister or you have more women in the parliament. I think it's extremely, extremely important. And I think that some of the people who are arguing against gender quota, I think that the ambitions may be that the feminist ideas should win by a coup d'etat, by a revolution. I think we have to realize that creating a gender equal society will not come through a coup d'etat. It's a long, long process, and it needs a lot of work to make it come through and to have the parity. Thank you.
Muito obrigada, Durdi, por estar conosco. A sua
Thank you very much, Durdi, for being with us. Your research does a travel, made us travel together. Everything you brought will help us so much in the reflections. When you speak about the parties, and the parties controlled by men, and in the most part, the men who have the control of economic power perceive this clearly, strongly here in Brazil. The issue of women helping build a sustainable society, paritary society. The sense, I think that everything you brought, we will ask your authorization if you allow. We are going to translate your slides, and we are going to share for the Congresswoman and also the invited ones, for everyone to know how the world is represented. I'm happy to see Latin America advancing while the world is 25.6, Latin America is 32.2. I want to congratulate the women from the countries who advanced. Brazil is only 15%, but we have countries with 40%, 45% who had advances, and they pull us. Our one is still recluded. We have to advance for Latin America goes together with America Latina. Thank you very much for your contribution. Feminist women, researchers, which bring information from this quality, help us very much. You help women very much. You are helping parliaments from all around the world, and women from Brazil and other countries give thanks for you, for your research and for your contribution. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Extremely interesting data here presented. I'd like to finally call communication information I have. It's already in our Congresswoman Claudia Mix for 15 minutes to talk about Chile experience, which recently was able to elect a major percentage of women. Constitution Assembly, more than men. Do this with much joy and with positive envy, so we can mirror in this, and at the same time with the conscience that this resulted in the struggle of the Chilean people for this democratization and participation of women in this democratization process. And here in Brazil, we also want to have a major participation from our struggle for diversity and democracy. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Congresswoman Claudia Mix. Thank you for your welcome.
Thank you so much for the welcome.
This is very necessary for sharing the experience.
It's a very important moment so we can share our experiences.
I want to tell you that effectively the result that we had presentation from the Constitutional Assembly, first time we put
for the first time in the history of our country,
years of history, we could record The people of Chile,
people from Chile were able to write a new constitution.
It was not free. We could get to this
to achieve this moment of a new constitution and an election of a new
there was a social revolt in 2019.
There was a lot of struggle in the year of 2019.
Killings,
there was a lot of murders and assassinations.
More than 500 fellow men who lost their eyes.
A lot of people had their eyes
mutilated from
during the
repression of this government.
manifestations.
So we have an important cost in terms of life. So finally, human rights suffered so much, not only with
our history of the dictatorship,
but, the social revolt left a result.
We now are able, even though we have this history, we are now able to write a new history with a new constitution.
We had the constitution from Pinochet and dictatorship. It was not okay.
We did not have a written constitution, so it was a necessity that we had inside the country.
The characteristics as the other societies, we had colonialism, patriarchy.
So in our country, we also have
and very
a lot of
in this our structure.
Power
it was so
inside the
hard
power,
to
inside the
advance.
politics.
National Congress, women representation was very low before. We had 15%, 120 congresswomen. Without this constitution now, when we had this constitutional reform in 2016, we had more women to Congress, and we got to 67%. Oh, sorry.
Recentemente conseguimos subir o número de parlamentares.
Thanks to the constitution reform, who allowed the gender reforms. They altered the results, they changed the boxes. There was an incentive with political parties. They put the candidates lists, 40% women in the lists, between 40 and 60%, but the party opted for the minimum, 40% minimum. The law prevented this. But there was this resource for each elected woman and for each vote gained by women. This political party had twice the vote or incentivate this elected deputy. They had money for this women's vote. That was the only way that they could achieve this. The political party could put this women not as a friend, not in the end. They put the woman in the priority in the list to the Congress. The result was good. Obviously, we always want to advance more, but from that, we have done is the possibility to have more gender quotes in other representation jobs. We are discussing and solving, and the social revolt brought other themes over the table. Not only the gender quota, but the parity. We from Chile, we say that the gender parity came to stay. There's an institution. Two weeks ago, most women, from 2 weeks from now, we have more women than men. The first constitutional assembly in the world who has parity in this representation. And the law project, in this law project that we brought, correction of gender, which permitted us to reassure and guarantee the balance between representation from women and men. But in particular, the government, the amount of women who had the majority of votes were most than men, and the correction that we had in the law ended benefiting the men. We did not imagine that. We did not imagine that 57% of women. We ask ourselves if finally we had more representation, but we can never guess. We had more support from women that we had imagined. We had work to gain the confidence of the people that we women has the same capacity, but we have so much more heart to the political activity. We are sure that the political activity are going to be more human, more transparent, more honest, since we bring more men to the politics. So we are very happy. Our companions is very happy because this Constitutional Commission brought this to the women. And we said that the parity came to stay, and we had next elections in November for the Parliament. Very rare in this political praxis. It's going to begin to the discussion about the structure of the Parliament and the Constitutive Assembly. The Parliament, one chamber, had another election in 2 years, but they want to incorporate, besides the gender parity in this constitution, they hope to replicate this in the new election in the Parliament. Besides this is the reserved gain for indigenous people, the disabled, and the transgender, the representation for all these minorities, not only the women. She believes that the learning that they had at the social revolt, where they say proudly that Chile woke up from after more than 30 years of neoliberalism, full of injustice and disequality. It demands more representation and participation. We are discussing other projects who could transform the representation, national representation, equiparate the Constitutional Assembly. We would like to replicate this experience to all the representative spaces, collectives, districts, regions, where it's assured. They don't want quotas anymore. They overcome that. They show that with the representation they got in the election. They do not talk anymore about quota, but they talk about gender parity. And they have won this in the Parliament and every collective space of representation. They want to have a great participation of the women in all the vulnerable groups. And the indigenous people, they want to be, or they are the only one which the indigenous people are not recognized by Constitution. So they hope to put them in the debate of Constitution. And also, they want to do a plebiscito, to approve this in the Constitution. She would like to share this. She would like to share 3 or 4 documents that could fit to Brazilian documents which are made from the library, from the Congress of their country. They don't want to she would like to revise this document. She regrets Brazil this political time. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We are very attentive here. We are seeing the unfold of your movement, the demand of rights from the people. We are the people advancing the social constitution. Me and Congresswoman Lidis, we are very happy looking your story and try to understand which is possible for one is possible for other. Your example has been very important for us. When you affirm that women supported women, and the woman goes with more heart, with more transparency, more honesty, and now with representation of diversity, what happened in Chile now, the unfold, what happens will be a great incentive for all the world and Latin America, and especially for our Brazilians. You already sent the documents, already are here. We are going to send to all the congresswomen here, our 77 congresswomen, for them to know a little bit more about what you are doing in Chile. And we are going to join your movement and embrace all Chilean women through you, giving our gratitude for your contribution and for your struggle. You shook our hearts with so much disposition for struggle. Thank you very much. I also want to thank the presence of Angela, Congresswoman, of Teresa Nelma, great reference for all of us in the Parliament. I ask if the present Congresswoman, if anyone would like to use the speech for 3 minutes. And I also ask for everyone to let the open camera. People want to make a picture, so she asks to everyone to open the camera. So we're going to do this photography. Any of the present Congresswoman want to use the space to speech? Congresswoman Rosa, Erika Kokai.
I would like to speak quickly. First, thank for the realization of this seminar. We need to share what we have been doing around the world, because this struggle, this fight for women, it's a universal fight, it's a universal struggle. It's human rights, and it's the struggle for a valid existence. And it affects all women all around the world, because they are inside of a patriarchal logic. So rights are not for only a certain groups of humans, but for all humans. So we need also to understand that the rights are impossible to divide. You can't put a hierarchy or divide them. When we talk about representation of women in the spaces of power, we're changing a construction of gender that was established and that was developed during many years through this patriarchal logic, that women are a property of other people. And this construction puts women in a marginalized place or in specific places. So we want to work in the perspective of equity, of gender equity, in all the spaces of power. And for that, we have to fight against this that is possible to see in all places of our society. Here in Brazil, there's an idea that feminicide is always preceded by a symbolic feminicide of dehumanization in a non-literal way. So the representation of women in the spaces of power, especially in the Parliament, we recognize that there is a construction of gender that hierarchizes the human beings and that puts women in a difficult position and that makes us not the owners of ourselves and of our bodies, even though we fight every day for our bodies to be our bodies. So the sub-representation comes from all these causes and from all this process that established this construction of gender and these women only being able to access specific spaces and not having a power of decision. At the same time, having women in this kind of spaces, we stimulate other women to be able to occupy these spaces. And from there, build a society that will be democratic because there is an equity of gender. So when we talk about Chile, it's an experience that makes us full of courage and looking forward to having quotas here.
De verdade, negam que há uma discriminação histórica.
When people go against quotas, they deny that there's a historical discrimination against these groups. Not only in Brazil, but in other countries. And there's always a violence against women, a discrimination against women. Here in Brazil, we still haven't been able to finish the cycle of colonialism and also not being able to finish the cycle of slavery. And during all this time, there was a violence of gender. There are glass ceilings. So if you don't recognize that there's glass ceilings and walls of glasses, sorry. So if you don't recognize that they exist, you cannot face them. There's a discrimination that can be expressed in the small number of parliamentary. It will also be able to be seen in the salaries, in the payment gap, and also in fewer women in places of power in companies. And there's a whole process of culpabilization of women. As mentioned before, the women won't vote in women and this kind of excuses, but what we actually have, it's a patriarchal construction.
Como se pudessem dizer que as mulheres
use an excuse that we have a sub-representation as a way of saying that women are not interested in these spaces of power, which is not the reality. The reality is that there's a lot of violations and violences suffered by women, institutional violence beyond others.
Ser reconhecida para que possa ser enfrentada.
So this situation has to be faced, has to be combated, so then we can build a more democratic and more just society. I'd like to thank a lot for this moment, because the seminary has to be repeated in other moments and have developments through it, so we can share this experience and inspire ourselves on them, and then change this reality of subrepresentation.
Que me parece que é muito importante. Nós estamos falando de representação feminina
We're talking about women representation, or the facing the subrepresentation in the spaces of the parliament. But this needs to be questioned in all the spaces, not only in the parliament. Therefore, I'd like to thank again for this moment and say that we'll be facing this reality because we have the courage to face this subrepresentation and face the political violence against women that happens in the parliament, that we have a lot of cases of this kind of violence inside the parliament, as a way of always making us be silenced, because they don't want us to go to places, achieve places that they don't think are our spaces. We received recently, we heard recently, a speech of a congressman who said that he wanted us to go to sleep and never wake again.
Nos silenciar,
they look for ways to silence us.
Nós tenhamos entrado dentro.
Even though we're here, we're inside this place that they did not want us to be part of. They wish we were only men. They still try to find a way to silence us. And every day, they make different kinds of acts that are violence, political violence against women. So we don't exercise the democracy that will only be complete if we don't have this gender gap, if we have a real equity, gender equity. We face this every day inside the parliament, and the Chamber of Deputies is an example, and that we can list a lot of cases saying that women don't behave like women, that women should support men, that women are hysterical, that women are crazy. This is what this group try to tell every day. But they won't succeed. They won't silence us. We'll keep on going, and we'll change this reality of gender violence and all the other violences. That this patriarchal logic and misogynist logic that is present inside here and also inside the presidency, they won't silence us. All the women are the ones who are really building a democracy all around the world. And we are here changing this reality and changing this subrepresentation. With a lot of capacity of being the owner of our own bodies. Congratulations to the Secretary of Women for the realization of this seminar. I believe it should be one of the seminaries, and that we have different ones to begin these discussions. Thank you, Erika. The basis of this parliament, we're really proud to have you here. You're an important representative. You never lose the optimism in the fight for women. Thank you so much. We'd like to say that we're very happy in this afternoon. We had amazing classes here. I feel like a student always. It's always good to hear these good experiences. Even when we listen about the problems, we still find ways to advance, to keep going forward. So this has been amazing in this sense. I'd like to ask everyone to now say their goodbyes. Firstly, Ana Cláudia. I'd like to thank on my behalf and the behalf of the Secretary of Women, in the name of Deputy Litsi and every deputy that is here present. So let's begin with Ana Cláudia, who represents UN for Women. Ana Cláudia, you have 3 minutes. Thank you so much, Deputy Rosa. I just wanted to really thank you for being able to participate in this international debate, that we can share the same challenges, but also different results, that we can change this reality even though we have these barriers.
Temos a paridade aí no nosso horizonte, algo factível.
Yeah, we have the parity in our horizon. And then we have Latin American women telling their stories and inspiring us to change our reality here. I not only thank you, but I also put myself, also say that I'm available to support whenever I can, whatever we can. Thank you so much. Good afternoon.
Enobrece com a sua participação o nosso seminário. Vamos precisar muito estarmos
Our seminar is a lot better because you're here. So thank you. Still need your help, definitely. I'd like to pass the floor to Cristina Brits to say her goodbyes. Thank you so much for the invitation. This debate has been of great help because this is a collective fight, a collective struggle. Count on us, always.
Levantamos el legado de Vita y de las madres y abuelas de Plaza de Mayo, así que seguramente vamos haciendo el camino para todas las argentinas que seguirán levantando la bandera por más igualdad para todas las mujeres compañeras. Muchas gracias, hermanas brasileras.
Thank you so much for all the Brazilian deputies.
Muito obrigada, Cristina. Vamos precisar de mãos dadas na luta, continuar avançando aqui.
We'll be together in this struggle, in this fight, so we can advance here. Pass the floor now to the deputy, to the Senator, Andrea, the representative Bolivia, my neighbor, who is very close to the state of Mato Grosso here in Brazil, where I'm from. And it was very interesting to see you so young, with such an amazing story. So now the Senator Andrea. Thank you so much for the invitation.
It's very
interesting to see the different points of views.
De la conquista de nuestros derechos, los colores político-partidarios siempre tienen que estar a un lado, a pesar de que
And I reinforce that the question of parties and politics needs always to be close together so we can solve the situation. I hope that Brazil can achieve a system that is paritary, so then more women and more young people will be able to be empowered. I learned a lot with all of you, and I'd like to thank you all for this. Thank you so much. And special for Drude. And for your presentation, I learned a lot about you. Looking forward to read your book. Big hug to everyone. Then we can keep together, trying to get more rights for women. Thank you. Thank you so much, Andrea. I'd like to give the floor now.
Muchísimas gracias por esta oportunidad de compartir.
Thank you so much for this opportunity
to be here. De energía para enriquecernos, pero también como para todo lo que sigue.
Spaces are important
yo quiero
transmitir
esa energía que yo recibí y especialmente para nuestras compañeras de Brasil. Esta es una lucha que empezaron muchas mujeres hace mucho tiempo y yo siempre digo en el plenario legislativo que yo estoy aquí por las mujeres que lucharon antes y que estoy aquí y tengo una gran responsabilidad de reconocer ese trabajo, pero también de trabajar para que las mujeres de hoy y las mujeres de mañana y las niñas de hoy y las de mañana puedan ejercer plenamente todos sus derechos. También importantísimo seguir trabajando en todos los mecanismos institucionales para garantizar la plena participación de todas las mujeres en todos los espacios de toma de decisiones. ¿Para qué? Para construir y para implementar una agenda robusta de transformación de nuestra sociedad sociedades y también que no solo las estructuras de desigualdad de género, sino también aquellas estructuras patriarcales, coloniales, adultocéntricas que nos dominan. El Estado tiene que tener en su centro la protección de todos los derechos para todas las personas, y aquí la interseccionalidad es vital. Y I am very complacent to learn about Drude. It is very important for us, and your explanation was very, very good for us, and por todas nuestras amigas brasileñas.
For all our Brazilian friends,
obrigada.
Thank you so much.
Muito obrigada, Nielsen. Eu acho que a Costa Rica já nos deu uma história, uma grande contribuição.
Thank you so much, Nielsen. Costa Rica has given a great contribution.
Betiana Dias, que representou aqui o Uruguai, também o Uruguai.
Now, Betiana Dias, who represented Uruguay, that has a lot of struggles, but is now also advancing in this representation, and we have to talk a bit more, right, Betiana, so we can solve the situation. At the floor, Betiana Dias. I don't know if Betiana is still in the room. I don't know if she's listening.
A Yara faz contato aí com a Betiana, enquanto isso...
Yara will be contacting Betiana.
Chegou aqui muita força para representar a mulher no Parlamento.
And now I'll pass to Claudia, who's here representing the Chilean Parliament. I get very emotional to be able to share this kind of moment with you. This has been a great result we had in Chile.
Nothing. For our dear deputies,
all the deputies in Brazil, you can.
That we can succeed.
You can do this for all of us.
Because
all
here in Chile, everything you have, everything we have, we will share with you. All the projects, everything you want, because our interest in you and like you, we have our fight for abortion, for legalizing abortion.
In the fight for abortion,
in this
you can also learn from us
the political representation. We can learn with each other.
We have the same fights.
Pero somos todas una. Así que les mando un abrazo grande.
Countries, we still are the same.
Y nada, hay que echarle para adelante y esperamos celebrar la paridad de género en el próximo Parlamento de Brasil. Muchas gracias por la oportunidad.
Gender in the Parliament in Brazil.
Obrigada, Cláudia. Quero dizer a Cláudia que o Brasil tem quase 300 etnias entre os nossos povos indígenas. E nós temos uma mulher parlamentar indígena eleita pela primeira vez, elegemos uma mulher, que é a deputada Joênia, que é do povo Apxana, do estado de Roraima. Então, é uma grande companheira, uma grande parceira, e que representa muito bem as mulheres indígenas brasileiras. E, com certeza, agora, os indígenas estando presentes na Constituinte, vai fazer a diferença também no Chile. E, para nós, é muito importante...
Because, for sure, it will make a difference in Chile. No one can speak about yourself better than yourself. So, here we are discussing about Chile and about this question that are totally vinculated with the indigenous people. And it's amazing that Chile elected representation. I'd like to invite our researcher from Sweden, who gave us quite a lecture. Bettina, can you hear us? Okay, so we will hear Bettina. And she will speak by the end. Bettina. Well, thank you very much for this place, for this invitation,
como desafío seguir
for this
compartiendo.
challenge by sharing.
Más temprano en mi exposición
Because
también de las diferentes exposiciones que han hecho las legisladoras.
From everything we learned from the different speeches, we need to talk about it, and we need to research about these new tools, and we need to strengthen the idea of an international, how do you call that? Feminism, of an international feminism. We are here at your orders, to our Brazilian colleagues, in the political women and parliamentarians in general, in Brazil, Latin America. Thank you for sharing this amazing and genius experiences. It's amazing to hear about all this in firsthand. And again, thank you. It was so enrichment. I don't know. It was amazing to compare other countries from Latin America. At this moment of pandemics, it's really good to have a moment of political exchange among Latin America. Thank you, Vichana, for receiving us. I hope we'll be able to do a presential meeting, because here in Latin America we love to hug, we love to touch, we love to party, to confraternize with each other. So we'll do a discussion, a presential discussion after the pandemic is over. Now we'd like to ask our researcher who has such a great contribution, and if she authorizes, we will love to share this material and to translate it. Now we give you your word. We give you the word.
Talk about me?
Hello.
Okay.
Right? Was it me?
Yes,
Interpreter. Yeah. Okay. Now it's right. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for the invitation to participate in this very interesting meeting. I have really enjoyed listening to all the experience from so many different countries. And well, this is some of the good thing coming out of the awful pandemic, the COVID-19, that we have these meetings and it's so easy, and we should keep up with this kind of global web discussions in the future also. I'm very impressed. I said that from what's happening in the Latin American countries, or some of the Latin American countries, in terms of women's representation. Well, in fact, I love Latin America, and I should tell Rosa, I have been to Mata Grossa, and it was an experience of life to be there. I want very much to thank the organizers. I want to thank very much the interpreters who has been doing good work. You have really been fighting very hard to help, especially me, I think, with the interpretation. I can tell the rest of you that at one point they were even so eager that I had two people at the same time translating into English for a short period of time. That was very interesting. I think that I think we are on the right track, even if there are anti-feminist and anti-gender movements and trends in the world. I think that women have become so strong, and women's movement so strong, that there's no way that we can go back to how things were before. So I think we have to continue the fight for gender equality, for gender parity. And I have no doubt that the gender parity and the full inclusion of women of all kinds of women will be a benefit for all genders, will be a benefit for democracy, will be a benefit for the whole globe. So I think this is called la lucha continua in Spanish, something like that. Thank you very much.
Muito obrigada, Durde, a pesquisadora que esteve conosco esta tarde, trazendo muitas informações importantes e, com certeza, feministas, pesquisadoras que
we have a lot of information here, and we understand what the woman needs to receive your liberty. This, she said thank you.
Deputada do Estado da Bahia, com quem dividi essa tarde.
She's gonna pass the talk to a deputada from
Política, que tem uma história, tanto no legislativo como no executivo, como a representação forte na defesa das mulheres. Para suas
she's gonna talk. She has a very representative. I can't. Thank you for everybody, for all participants to change your experience and work. Our research from Sweden and the other participation, and special my friend, colleague from the coordinator of the Human Secretary, and she worked against, oh my God.
Do futuro das nossas crianças e jovens.
She said thank you about the work of other deputada from Brazil.
Na Câmara dos Deputados. Quero encerrar.
She wants to finish, and she would like to say how important was this talking about these politicians.
Em todos os níveis, mas principalmente sem grande afetividade, com crescimentos homeopáticos. Agora, nós percebemos...
Now, we understand that equality in Brazil and other countries is respect of the access of the financial in elections. It's important to say that the financial in elections now is growing up for women, and now 50% of the human is in the chamber in Brazil.
De uma só vez e passamos para 26.
Agora, and now we pass from 10 and after 25, and then 50% of the participation of women in the Parliament. And we have to grow up the financial of the human in the politicians.
Não quer participar da política, ela não quer, porque não vê a possibilidade de se eleger.
Human sometimes doesn't work in the politicians not because they want, it's because doesn't know how to do. And if they understand how to work in the politicians, in the next election, we're going to have more women, and we're going to have the equal. We're going to discuss about about many organizations that human is going to be important piece. Oh my God.
Entre as nossas companheiras, que eu, pelo menos, não pude perceber muito, é a lista fechada partidária e a lista aberta. O Brasil tem essa singularidade.
In Brazil, we have a list about the human, and some parts has the list. Oh my God, no, I can't.
No Brasil, de concentração de poder coronelista e, portanto, da elite mais autoritária, os homens admitirem uma vitória dessa, que é uma lista fechada partidária com alternância de cadeiras entre homens e mulheres.
It's important that we have the list that human and man gonna change
that we aim in Brazil to democratize Brazil, for democracy in Brazil. If some of the countries here in our utopic Latin America, the participation of our indigenous women, in our case, Black women need to be represented.
E as mulheres indígenas também, que representam
indigenous women representing our originary people.
Também tem que significar a inclusão das mulheres negras.
And quotas need to mean the inclusion of indigenous women and Black women. Thank you very much. This great deputy. Thank you.
A deputada Tereza Nelma, deputada pelo estado de Alagoas, que é a procuradora-geral, eu sou apenas um ajudante dela.
I'm sorry, my internet.
Da Procuradoria da Câmara dos Deputados.
Eu quero
cumprimentar at the persecutor of the deputy chamber.
Rosaneide, tá? Mas eu ouvi muito bom esse encontro nosso, tá certo? Cumprimentar a minha querida.
Such a great meeting. I would like to greet my dear secretary. She's the second deputy. I'd like to greet all the deputies from every country. We need to integrate. Need to be more integrated, understand each other. We have a lack of understanding.
Nós temos uma pauta que nós precisamos conviver mais. Nós precisamos, sim, desse intercâmbio, desse trabalho em conjunto. Nós temos uma pauta que nós queremos conversar com todas as deputadas de outros países, que é a violência política no Parlamento. Nós precisamos, sim, estar juntas. Parabéns, nós temos que discutir as cotas, estamos com um problema seríssimo, que é agora, para 2022, o sistema eleitoral, como é que vai ser, as regras, como é que nós, mulheres, vamos aumentar a bancada, que estratégia nós vamos ter, que participação nós vamos ter.
What strategy we're going to have, how we're going to enhance.
Agradecer a todas vocês, a você, Rosaneide, muito bem coordenou, e a Lídice também, E um abraço a todas as colegas de outros países. Muito obrigada.
Obrigada, Tereza. Quero dizer a todos e todas, se nós temos uma referência de alguém que é guerreira, é a deputada
If we have a reference on someone who is a fighter here, we have Tereza Nelma. She's always in the battle. And we have a privilege to have you right next to us. I'd like to thank the volunteer translators, Laís and Carolina, who translated to Spanish, Juliana and Marina and Joaquim, who translated to English. I'd like also to thank Thaisa, Marina, Isabel, Gerson, Dani, and Lynn from the Secretary of Women. And a special hug to Yara, who is an important partner, who talked to most of the people who were invited here, and is someone who is always active, is always trying to make a change here, especially in the Secretary for Women. And she's doing what she does best, which is to empower women here and in Brazil. I'd like to tell all of you who gave us the privilege to be here together in this afternoon. We do not live here as we came. We here learn from the source, and now we dream about new possibilities, and we can bring to our countries new contributions. So if any time your country has changed something for better, tell us, so we can think how we can do that. How can we incorporate your changes and add them to our possibilities, so other women can be part of these different spaces of power and others. So we can look at society with love, but in a way that we are able to demand our rights. We can change our history and change the history of the world. I hope the Brazilian Parliament gives the right steps so we can have more than 15% of representation. And then I just wanted to highlight the representation that we have from Lidse and from Benedict, who are here since the Constitution in this fight, step by step, getting new themes being discussed, new concepts being incorporated, and new possibilities being given. And I'd like to honor all our guests who helped us so much and shared their experiences in their countries, in their parliaments. And also Drude, who brought this vision, her point of view, from different parliaments. Then I wanted to cite here Cora Coralina, a Brazilian writer, who shows the struggle of Brazilian women here. She says, I'm that woman, the one that time really taught to love life and not to give up on the struggle. To start from the laws, show the word, believe in human values, and be an optimist. My best to all of you here, and especially to Celina Leão, our coordinator, and all the women who are part of this Council of Representation of Women, to all the 77 parliamentaries we have here in Brazil, and all the parliamentarians that are represented here. We're women, we're here through popular vote, and we're representing other women here. We want more inclusion. We don't want the places of men. We want our own place, our own spot. We want a just society that is inclusive, and that our children are able to write new stories. We're equal through the law, and we want to be equal in practice. my best to all of you, and we'll be together making a difference here. This seminar has just finished, and it brought a lot of contributions to the Brazilian Parliament. Thank you so much to all the guests and all the contributions.